So this video is meant to help people compare these two Casio Pro Trek watch models, which are similar but also very different. I'm talking about the Casio PRG-30 and the Casio PRW-35. And I'm sorry that they're not time synced, although the seconds are actually matched up. The minutes are not. So sorry about that. So at the time when I was deciding which Protrek to buy, it was between these two models because these were fairly small, but there weren't any videos about these particular watches comparing them. And so what I ended up doing was buying both because I wanted to see which one was better. I'm gonna put this on my wrist now. If you're familiar with my videos, you know that I don't like to hold watches. I like to actually put them on wrist. So putting on this PRW-35, I'm going to be holding this one primarily, but I'll swap back and forth. Just as some background, I've owned these watches for a while and I really like them. I like the Protrek line in general. I'm a casual wearer. I don't use it for hiking or as a compass. So if you're looking for that type of outdoor review, this isn't it. Now I've made individual reviews on each of these watches on my channel. So if you want to know more about each individual watch, my pros and cons, my likes and dislikes, those videos are up there. But I want to primarily talk about each watch directly against the other to help those deciding which one to get. Now, while they are essentially the same watch, I would recommend the PRW-35 for a few reasons: the size, the strap, and the screen. And I'm going to talk about more of that in detail. So as someone with a small wrist, let's talk about size because that is very important to me. Now, most of the Protrek watches are large. To me, they're very oversized for someone with a sub 7-inch wrist. But with these two models, I actually found them to be fairly acceptable in terms of just wrist presence for somebody with someone with a small wrist. Let me swap here. While the PRW wears okay, as you can see, I got it on the 4th buckle on my wrist, by the way, and it wears okay. I don't mind actually wearing this watch, and the sizes are not that big of a difference, but in terms of the size versus the PRG-30 compared to the 35, it is a little bit bigger. So while the PRG-30 wears okay, the PRW-35 looks way better on my wrist in my opinion, because it's just a little bit smaller. And so although they have a thicker wrist presence from the side, I think the PRW-35, by having it being a little bit smaller in terms of size, I think it helps to somewhat counter that oversizedness. Now for me, I feel like I can pull off both watches without having to second guess myself. The real test for me is if I have to ask if the watch looks too big, it's too big. So for both of these watches, I never really had to ask myself whether it's too big. However, if you do want smaller of the two and you're worried about that, then that's why I would recommend the PRW-35. All right, next thing I want to mention is the strap. Now, the PRW-35 is just more comfortable. The strap is thinner. It's not as rubbery. I don't know if it's that bio material versus this is definitely not that bio material. But this one feels smooth and it's extremely, extremely comfortable. That's the first thing that I noticed when I put this watch on. The PRW-30, however, is slightly thicker and it feels rubbery. It's just a little bit thicker rubber. Some people might prefer that, but I actually don't prefer that. In fact, when it comes to the straps, I wish I could swap out the PRG-30 thick rubbery strap with a black version of what's on the 35. Now, actually having worn both of these watches, especially when you're wearing them back to back, you can tell the difference. And so when it comes to comfortability, just wanting to wear the watch because it feels a lot more comfortable, this one is the watch for me. The funny thing is, reviews don't often mention this, but I actually think it's a key point when deciding between these two particular watches, or even just one of these particular watches. I think that's actually a key point. It's hard to convey comfort factor, but I will say that this 35 strap is way more comfortable. So again, between these two watches, if you want to talk about comfort, you're gonna have to go with the 35. Okay, and the last quick point I want to mention is the screen. I'm gonna take off the watch to demonstrate. Now the PRW-35 has the better screen. It has an STN LCD display, which is a little bit sharper, particularly at different angles. So this is not a big deal for me, but if it's a big deal for you, then it's something that you may want to consider. So straight on, they look, I know it's really hard to see with equal light, I'll try to do my best. Straight on, they actually look, I'm just trying to make this fair comparison. Okay, you just gotta trust me. Straight on, they look identical. The things start to change. I'm gonna tilt it so the light actually is equal on them, okay? The things start to change when you tilt the screen. So you can see right here, and I think this is a good demonstration of what that type of display actually does. So the PRG-30 on the left here, you can already see it's, in the camera, it's already blurred out just based on the angle, but you can still read the 35. Now, this isn't a huge deal, and like I said, I don't think for most people it's really gonna matter all that much, but if you want the best viewing angle, then just comparing these two, you're gonna wanna go with the 35. Now, maybe it sounds like the PRG-30 is a terrible watch and it's just like total trash, but actually, let me put it back on the wrist so it makes it feel better, right? But let me talk about it for a little while, because I think it's worth noting in this discussion, right? So although I'd recommend the 35 to most people, I just want to highlight, again, in direct comparison to the 35, what some of the PRG-30 features that might be okay. So the first thing I do want to mention is the color. The models that are currently in existence for this one, they're monotone colors, which I actually prefer. They just have a simpler bezel design as well, which I also like. They're cheaper than the PRW-35, so if you're looking to save some money but you still want this look, the big digital watch with the look, you can't really go wrong with that. But I will say that if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have skipped on the 35. Like, if I could have bought both watches and then sent them back, I would have returned this one, just because I think this one is a whole lot better. However, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't buy both. And in that sense, I'm glad that I bought both watches. You know, these Protreks are real gems in the Casio line. I know that they don't get as much attention as the G-Shocks because I don't know why, maybe just marketing. But I really do feel like the Protrek watches are good enough for most people. Now, they tend to be a little bit on the large side. They are marketed more towards outdoors and hiking, and maybe their water resistance is not as good. I think it's 100 across the board for Protreks, and then G-Shocks, I think it's your standard 200. But the numbers are really easy to read, not just on this one, but even on the other models. It's just easy to read. It's highly visible. I do like the auto light feature. I don't have that on, but you can turn your wrist, the light goes on. And these are for both watches, I should mention. And it's just a good size on the wrist, but you got to look for the small ones. If you go in with the big ones, for someone with a small wrist, I would probably avoid those. And when it comes to Protrek, sure, they have all the bells and whistles of the ABC features, but I'm never really going to use them. In fact, I've never used them in a real practical sense because I don't go out that much. But it's the other features that draw me to the Protreks. And I would actually encourage people to take a look at the Protrek models rather than just jump straight to a G-Shock. So hopefully this video helped those who are trying to decide between these two. Like I said, I would recommend the 35 over the 30. So thanks for watching.